The massive chamber floated in space like a crystal bubble filled with strange lights and moving shapes. Inside this giant structure, known as the Galactic Council Hall, thousands of alien beings gathered from every corner of the galaxy. Some looked like giant squids with glowing tentacles, while others appeared as walking crystals that sparkled with inner fire. There were beings made of pure gas that shifted and swirled in contained fields, and creatures that looked like living metal with parts that moved and clicked constantly. Captain Jake Morrison stood behind a thick wall of clear metal, watching this incredible sight. He was a human from Earth, and right now he felt very small and very alone. His uniform bore the insignia of the human diplomatic mission, but today that uniform felt more like a target than a badge of honor. Next to him, Lieutenant Katie Barnes worked at a floating computer screen trying to keep track of all the different alien languages being spoken at once that the being in charge of this meeting was called Ambassador HFY, and he looked like a walking diamond with arms and legs made of living crystal. When he spoke, his voice came through machines that changed his crystal sounds into words that humans could understand. Right now, those words were making Jake's blood run cold. "We are here today to discuss the human problem," HFY announced, and his crystal body flashed with different colors as he spoke. "These creatures from the small yellow star have spread to 47 different star systems in only 200 years. No species in our recorded history has expanded so fast or so far." Jake gripped the rail in front of him so hard his knuckles turned white. He had been a soldier before becoming a diplomat, and every instinct told him this was not going to end. Well, the way these aliens talked about humans made it sound like they were discussing some kind of disease that needed to be stopped. Massive creature that looked like a giant octopus covered in glowing spots began to pulse with bright patterns across its skin. The translation machines picked up its words. Humans consume resources faster than any known species. They change entire planets to suit their needs without caring about the life that was already there. They fight wars not just for land or food, but for ideas and beliefs. This makes them unpredictable and dangerous. Katie looked up from her screen with fear in her eyes. "Jake, they are not just complaining about us. Look at these vote tallies I am tracking. This is not a discussion. This is a trial." Another alien spoke up, and this one was different from the others. It looked like a cloud of glowing gas held together by some invisible force. The other aliens seemed to respect this being more than the others, and when it spoke, the entire chamber became quiet. "I am Elder Mothka of the Ethereal Collective. We have watched the rise and fall of civilizations for 10,000 years. In all that time, we have never seen a species like humans. They advance their technology at a rate that should be impossible. They solve problems by thinking in ways that other species cannot understand. They work together in large groups, but also fight each other over small differences. The mathematics are very clear. If humans continue to grow and spread, they will control this entire galaxy in less than 500 years. Jake felt his heart sink as he realized what was happening. This was not a meeting to discuss trade agreements or territorial disputes. This was a gathering to decide whether humanity should be allowed to exist. The aliens were afraid of what humans might become, and they were going to do something about it. More aliens began to speak, and each one added to the case against humanity. They talked about human ships that traveled between stars carrying weapons that could destroy planets. They mentioned human colonies that had grown from small settlements to major cities in just decades. They discussed human scientists who had made discoveries that changed how the galaxy understood physics and biology. Everything that humans thought made them special, the aliens saw as threats. "Humans make alliances quickly, but they also break them when it suits their needs," said a creature that looked like a walking tree with glowing fruit hanging from its branches. They trade with anyone who has something they want, but they also spy on their trading partners and steal secrets. They say they come in peace, but their ships always carry enough weapons to fight wars. A being made of what looked like living metal raised several arms that ended in spinning tools. Human technology advances too quickly for proper safety testing. They create machines that think and then argue about whether those machines have souls. They modify their own bodies and minds with artificial parts. They play with forces that could destroy star systems and call it scientific research. Jake wanted to stand up and defend his species, but he knew that would only make things worse. The human delegation was here as observers only. They had no vote in this council and no real voice in what was about to happen. All they could do was watch and hope that somehow these aliens would decide that humans were not the threat they appeared to be. Elder Mothka spoke again, and her words carried the weight of ancient wisdom. We do not make this decision lightly. Humans have contributed much to galactic civilization. Their medical knowledge has saved billions of lives across hundreds of worlds. Their engineering skills have built structures that we thought were impossible. Their art and music have brought joy to species that had never experienced such things before. But their potential for destruction outweighs their contributions. The chamber erupted in sounds that the translation machines could barely handle. Aliens argued with each other in dozens of different ways. Some flashed lights while others changed colors or made vibrations that shook the air. The noise was overwhelming, but gradually it died down as Zexhai called for order. The time for debate has ended, the crystal being announced. We will now vote on Resolution 4471, which calls for the immediate containment of humanity within their home star system and the gradual reduction of their population to sustainable levels. Katie grabbed Jake's arm, and her face was pale with shock. Gradual reduction of population. They are talking about genocide, but they are using nice words to make it sound better. The voting began immediately, and Jake watched in horror as species after species cast their votes in favor of the resolution. The voting displays showed the numbers climbing steadily. 820 votes in favor, 830, 840. Only a few species abstained from voting, and none voted against the resolution. When the final tally appeared on the displays, Jake felt like he had been punched in the stomach. 847 species had voted to essentially end human civilization. 23 had abstained. 0 had voted to protect humanity. Zexhai struck a crystal gavel against a crystal platform, and the sound rang through the chamber like a bell. Resolution 4471 passes by overwhelming majority. The cleansing will begin immediately. All human assets outside the Sol system are to be removed or destroyed within 6 months. Humans are hereby confined to their home star system indefinitely. Jake activated his emergency communicator with shaking hands. The message he sent to Earth was brief, but it carried the weight of doom for his entire species. Come home quickly. They have declared war on our existence. As the alien delegates began to leave the chamber, Jake and Katie stood alone behind their barrier, watching the end of humanity's dream of joining the galactic community. Instead of becoming partners with these incredible beings, humans were now prisoners in their own corner of space. The galaxy had voted and humanity had lost everything. Dia Lisa Chun was working late in her laboratory when the emergency message arrived. She had been studying strange energy patterns near the Vega star system for 3 years and was close to a major breakthrough when her computer screen suddenly flashed red with an urgent communication from Earth. The message was short, but terrifying in its simplicity. All human assets must return to Sol system immediately. Council Resolution 4471 is now in effect. This is not a drill. Lisa stared at the screen, trying to understand what was happening. She commanded the Terra Prime Research Station, which orbited a small moon in the Vega system. Her team of 50 scientists had been working on projects that could change how humans understood the universe. Now they were being ordered to abandon everything and run home like children called in from playing outside. She activated the station-wide communication system, and her voice echoed through every corridor and laboratory. All personnel report to your department heads immediately. We have received evacuation orders from Earth Command. Begin emergency shutdown procedures for all experiments and prepare for immediate departure. The response was immediate chaos as scientists and support staff rushed through the hallways trying to understand what was happening. Dr. Gary Foster from the physics department burst into Lisa's office with confusion written across his face. Lisa, what is going on? We are in the middle of experiments that have taken years to set up. You cannot just shut down a quantum field generator without proper procedures, or we could create a black hole. I know, Gary, but we have no choice, Lisa replied as she began transferring critical data to portable storage devices. The message came directly from Earth Command with the highest priority codes. Something has happened at the Galactic Council, and we need to get home now. Across the galaxy, similar scenes were playing out on hundreds of human colonies in space. Stations. The mining facility on Kepler 442b received the evacuation order, while crews were deep underground extracting rare minerals that Earth desperately needed. The agricultural colonies around Proxima Centauri got the message just as their crops were ready for harvest. Research stations throughout human space began shutting down experiments and packing up equipment that had taken decades to build and install. Admiral Ben Clark commanded the evacuation from his flagship, the HMS Determination, which was positioned at the edge of human-controlled space. His weathered face showed the strain of coordinating the largest movement of people and equipment in human history. The bridge around him buzzed with activity as officers tried to track the location and status of every human vessel and facility in the galaxy. Status report, Commander Hayes, Admiral Clark ordered as he studied the massive display screen that showed human assets scattered across dozens of star systems. Commander Rachel Hayes consulted her tactical display, where thousands of moving dots represented human ships, vehicles, and installations. Sir, we have confirmed contact with 87% of human assets. Most colonies are responding well to evacuation orders, but some of the outer rim settlements are having trouble with transport capacity. The mining operations in the Centauri system are requesting additional cargo ships to move their heavy equipment. Admiral Clark nodded grimly as he processed the information. What about alien response? Are the Council forces interfering with our withdrawal? No, sir. Long-range sensors show massive Council fleet buildups along their territorial borders, but they are maintaining their distance. It appears they want us to leave voluntarily rather than forcing us out with military action. The Admiral understood the political calculation behind this approach. If the Council had to use force to remove humans, it would look like aggression against a peaceful species. By giving humans time to evacuate voluntarily, they could claim they were being reasonable and humane. The end result would be the same, but the Council could maintain their moral high ground. On Earth, President Maria Rodriguez was dealing with her own crisis as reports came in from across human space. The scale of the evacuation was overwhelming, and Earth simply did not have enough ships or facilities to handle the sudden return of millions of colonists. Emergency refugee camps were being set up in every available space, while the government tried to figure out how to house and feed all the people coming home. Madam President, we are receiving requests for emergency supplies from 17 different evacuation fleets, reported General Paul Anderson from the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Our transport capacity is already stretched beyond limits, and we still have settlements in the outer systems that have not even begun evacuation procedures yet. President Rodriguez rubbed her temples, trying to ease the headache that had been building for hours. Do whatever it takes, General. Requisition every civilian vessel that can make interstellar trips. Convert cargo ships to passenger transports. Build temporary habitats in Earth orbit if necessary. We are not leaving any human behind enemy lines. The evacuation continued for 3 months as human civilization slowly collapsed inward like a deflating balloon. Ships loaded with families' personal belongings and critical equipment streamed toward Earth from every direction. Some vessels were overcrowded with refugees, while others carried valuable scientific equipment and industrial machinery that could not be replaced. Lisa Chun was on one of the last ships to leave the Vega system. She sat in her small cabin aboard the transport vessel New Horizon, looking out at the stars and thinking about everything they were leaving behind. Her research station had been completely shut down and its valuable equipment either destroyed or brought back to Earth. Years of scientific work had been abandoned because aliens decided that humans were too dangerous to be allowed to explore the galaxy. The ship's captain announced over the intercom that they had crossed into Sol System. Space and Lisa could see other passengers crying with relief. They were home, but it felt more like a retreat than a homecoming. The New Horizon joined a long line of vessels waiting for clearance to dock. Earth's orbital facilities, which were completely overwhelmed by the massive influx of returning colonists out as the last human ship crossed into Sol. Space Admiral Clark received confirmation that the evacuation was complete. Every human settlement colony and outpost outside the Sol system had been abandoned. Behind them, automated council drones began the systematic destruction of everything humans had built. Over 2 centuries of expansion, the destruction was methodical and complete. Space stations were reduced to vapor by energy weapons that turned matter into pure light. Terraforming equipment was dissolved by exotic matter beams that broke down atomic bonds. Cities that had housed millions of people were erased from existence, as if they had never existed at all. The aliens were not just removing humans from their territory, they were erasing every trace that humans had ever been there. President Rodriguez addressed the world from the steps of the United Nations building in New York. Behind her, the sky was filled with the lights of returning ships and orbital construction as Earth struggled to accommodate its sudden population increase. Her words were broadcast to every corner of human space, which now consisted of only one star system. My fellow humans, today marks the end of one chapter in our story and the beginning of another. We are no longer citizens of the galaxy. We have been judged and found wanting by species that fear what we might become. But we are still here. We still exist. And we will survive this trial, just as we have survived every other challenge in our history. The crowd gathered before her included refugees from dozens of worlds, people who had lost everything except their lives. Many were angry, while others seemed broken by the sudden collapse of everything they had worked to build. But there was also determination in their faces, the stubborn human refusal to give up even when facing impossible odds. The Sol system is now our entire universe, the president continued. But it is our universe, and we will make it into something amazing. The aliens think they have solved their human problem by locking us away from the rest of the galaxy. They will learn that they have only created a bigger problem for themselves. As she spoke, massive construction projects were already beginning throughout the Sol system. The returning population brought with them the knowledge and experience gained from 2 centuries of interstellar expansion. Earth would become more than just a home world. It would become a fortress where humanity would grow stronger during their forced isolation. The Council had achieved their goal of creating a galaxy without humans, but they had no idea what humans would become while locked away in their prison. In trying to contain humanity, they had created the conditions for something far more dangerous than anything they had feared before. The galaxy was about to learn that caging humans was very different from defeating them. 50 years had passed since humanity disappeared from the galaxy, and Ambassador Krell of the Mechanic Imperium stood before the Galactic Council with news that would have been unthinkable when the cleansing began. His cybernetic body clicked, and word as internal systems processed data streams from across his territory. The mechanical parts that replaced most of his organic components flashed with warning lights that indicated serious problems throughout his domain. Honored council members, I come before you with urgent concerns about the stability of our galactic infrastructure, Krell announced as his voice synthesizer converted electronic impulses into words the universal translators could process. The antimatter production facilities in the Deneb sector have suffered catastrophic failures. 3 stations have been completely destroyed, and 2 more are operating at less than 10% capacity. The council chamber had changed significantly since the vote to remove humanity. Many of the species that had enthusiastically supported the cleansing now sent representatives who looked tired and stressed. The confident atmosphere of 50 years ago had been replaced by an undercurrent of anxiety that seemed to grow stronger with each passing year. Elder Mothka of the Ethereal Collective swirled in her containment field as she processed this information. Her gaseous form had lost some of its luminous quality and now appeared dimmer than the brilliant being who had helped orchestrate humanity's removal. Ambassador Krell, please explain how these failures occurred. The Deneb facilities have operated successfully for over 2 centuries. Krell's optical sensors flickered as he accessed technical reports from his engineering departments. The facilities were designed and maintained by human engineers for over 40 years. When humans were removed, we attempted to train our own technicians to perform the same functions. However, our mechanical species processes information differently than organic beings. The subtle adjustments and preventive maintenance that humans performed instinctively have proven impossible for us to replicate. Similar reports began flowing in from across the galaxy as other species discovered that removing humans had created problems they never anticipated. The Crystalline Dominion reported massive failures in their mining operations, where human engineers had designed safety systems that prevented catastrophic cave-ins. The tree-like beings of the Forest Consortium found that their agricultural worlds were experiencing crop failures because they could not understand the complex rotation patterns that human farmers had developed. Dr. Amy Foster sat in her office, deep beneath the surface of Earth, monitoring these developments through carefully hidden communication arrays that intercepted council transmissions. At 78 years old, she had spent most of her adult life studying alien civilizations and their economic relationships. Now she was documenting the collapse of the very system that had rejected her species. The patterns are exactly what we predicted, Ryan, she told her assistant Dr. Ryan Blake as they reviewed data streams from across the galaxy. Humans were not just another species competing for resources. We were the connecting tissue that held galactic civilization together. Ryan nodded as he manipulated holographic displays showing trade routes and economic indicators. Look at these shipping lane utilization rates. They have dropped by 60% since the cleansing. Human merchant captains were willing to take risks and explore new routes that other species considered too dangerous or unprofitable. The economic data told a story of steady decline that was accelerating with each passing year. Trade relationships that had flourished for centuries were breaking down as species discovered they could not replicate the complex negotiations and cultural translations that human diplomats had provided. Scientific research had slowed dramatically. Without human scientists who specialized in making connections between different fields of study, Ambassador Zex High of the Crystalline Dominion had been one of the strongest supporters of the cleansing, but now he faced problems that threatened his entire civilization. His perfect crystal cities were showing signs of structural failure as maintenance systems. designed by human engineers, began breaking down. The mathematical precision that crystal beings prized above all else could not solve problems that required intuitive understanding and creative thinking. We have attempted to hire engineers from 17 different species to maintain our atmospheric processors, Zexhai reported to an emergency council session. None have succeeded in understanding the human-designed systems that regulate air composition on our colony worlds. We are facing potential atmospheric collapse on 14 planets within the next 5 years. The proud Vorthan hegemony was experiencing similar difficulties with their massive space habitats. These artificial worlds housed billions of cephalopod, like beings in carefully controlled aquatic environments. Human bioengineers had designed the complex ecological systems that maintained water quality and managed waste processing. Without humans to maintain these systems, the habitats were slowly becoming uninhabitable. Representative Gorthvol of the Vorthan species pulsed with distressed patterns across his spotted skin as he addressed the council. Our population centers are experiencing toxic algae blooms that human specialists previously prevented through biological interventions. Our own scientists understand the theory, but they cannot implement the practical solutions that humans developed through trial and error over decades. The Forest Consortium faced the most ironic situation of all. These plant-like beings had voted to remove humans partly because they disapproved of human agricultural practices. Now they were discovering that human farmers had developed techniques for maximizing crop yields while maintaining soil health that no other species had been able to duplicate. Food shortages were spreading across their territory as traditional farming methods proved inadequate for feeding their growing population. Elder Branch Speaker Sylvana addressed the council with rustling leaves that indicated deep concern. Our agricultural output has declined by 40% since human farming advisors were removed. We are being forced to use more intensive cultivation methods that damage our soil and reduce future productivity. The sustainable practices that humans taught us require knowledge and skills that we have been unable to transfer to our own farmers. Dr. Amy Foster documented each failure with scientific precision while also feeling a deep sadness for the suffering that could have been prevented. They thought they were removing a threat, but they were actually destroying the foundation that their entire civilization rested on, she explained to her research team. Humans filled roles that other species either could not or would not perform. The communication networks that connected the galaxy were beginning to show serious problems as well. Human programmers had spent decades developing algorithms that manage data flow between thousands of different computer systems using hundreds of incompatible technologies. These elegant software solutions had allowed species with vastly different technological approaches to share information seamlessly without human programmers to maintain and update these systems. The galactic internet was slowly fragmenting into isolated networks that could not communicate with each other. Scientific data that had once flowed freely between research institutions was now trapped in isolated databases. Trade negotiations that had once been conducted through real-time communications now required weeks of delay as messages were manually translated and retransmitted through multiple relay stations. The Council tried desperately to find solutions to these growing problems. They offered enormous payments to species that could replace human capabilities. They established emergency training programs to teach critical skills to volunteers from different civilizations. They even attempted to create artificial intelligence systems that could replicate human decision-making processes. Every solution failed for the same fundamental reason. Humans had not just been workers performing specific tasks. They had been innovators who could see patterns and connections that other species missed. They had been diplomats who could understand and bridge cultural differences. They had been problem solvers who approached challenges from unexpected angles and found creative solutions that seemed impossible to more rigid thinking patterns. The ethereal collective, with their ancient wisdom and vast experience, tried to coordinate efforts to replace human capabilities. Elder Mothka convened special committees of the galaxy's brightest minds from dozens of species. These groups worked tirelessly to understand and replicate what humans had done so naturally. "We have studied human methods for 5 decades," Mothka reported to the Council after another failed attempt to solve the growing crisis. "Their approaches appear simple on the surface, but contain layers of complexity that we cannot fully comprehend. They seem to make intuitive leaps that bypassed logical analysis and arrived at correct solutions through processes we cannot duplicate." As the situation continued to deteriorate, some council members began to whisper about the unthinkable possibility of reversing the cleansing. These conversations were conducted in secret because admitting error would destroy the political careers of everyone involved in the original decision. But the evidence was becoming impossible to ignore. The cascade of failures that had been building for decades finally reached the point where entire star systems began going dark. Chief Engineer Tom Bradley monitored the galactic situation from his command post on Luna Station, watching in grim fascination as the infrastructure of an entire civilization crumbled in real time. His screens displayed maps of known space, with red zones spreading like an infection across previously stable regions. "Sector 7 Alpha just went completely offline," reported Lieutenant Susan Miller from her position at the communications console. "That makes 4 major communication hubs this week alone. The Confederation of Worlds is sending emergency requests for technical assistance, but they are still maintaining the quarantine barriers around our system." Tom shook his head at the bitter irony of the situation. The galaxy was collapsing around them, but the force fields and monitoring stations that kept humanity trapped in the Sol system remained at full power. The aliens would rather watch their civilization die than admit they needed help from the species they had tried to eliminate. Captain Alex Turner commanded one of Earth's most advanced reconnaissance vessels, the Shadow Runner, which had been specifically designed to penetrate alien detection systems. His mission was to gather intelligence about the galactic situation while remaining undetected. The stealth technology incorporated into his ship represented 50 years of focused human development, driven by the necessity of survival in a hostile universe. "Visual confirmation of the Andorian system collapse," Alex reported to Earth Command as his ship drifted silently through the outer edges of what had once been a thriving star system. 17 billion inhabitants and their infrastructure is failing because nobody knows how to maintain the atmospheric processors that humans installed there 200 years ago. The Andorian tragedy was being repeated across the galaxy as complex systems designed by human engineers began shutting down without proper maintenance. The aliens had assumed that any technology they could operate, they could also maintain, but they were discovering that operation and maintenance required completely different types of knowledge and skill on Earth. President Helen Martinez addressed an emergency session of the Global Council while reports continued streaming in from monitoring stations throughout the Sol system. The returning human population had grown to over 12 billion people as refugees from failed colonies continued arriving decades after the original evacuation. Earth had been transformed into something between a fortress and a refugee camp, as humanity struggled to accommodate everyone within their prison system. "The intelligence reports are clear," President Martinez announced to the assembled world leaders. "Galactic civilization is experiencing systemic collapse on a scale never before recorded. Conservative estimates suggest that over 200 billion sapient beings will die in the next 5 years unless current trends are reversed." The human leadership faced a terrible moral dilemma. They had the knowledge and skills needed to save the galaxy, but their own species remained under threat of extermination. Many argued that humanity should simply wait for their enemies to destroy themselves through incompetence. Others believed that allowing such massive loss of life would make humans no better than the aliens, who had tried to commit genocide against them. Admiral Sarah Williams had spent her entire career preparing for this moment. As commander of Earth's Deep Space Fleet, she had overseen the development of weapons and technologies that the Council could not even imagine. 50 years of isolation had forced humanity to become more innovative and more dangerous than they had ever been while part of galactic civilization. The Council fleets are powerful, but they rely on supply lines and support systems that are failing. Throughout their territory, Admiral Williams explained to the Global Defense Committee, "Our intelligence indicates that over 60% of their military installations are operating at reduced capacity due to maintenance problems. They can still destroy us, but they would probably destroy themselves in the process." The human military had evolved far beyond what the aliens remembered from 50 years ago. Necessity had driven innovation in ways that peaceful expansion never could. Human ships now incorporated quantum stealth systems that made them invisible to most alien sensors. Human weapons used exotic matter manipulation that could tear apart molecular bonds. Human defensive systems included energy shields that could deflect attacks from entire battle fleets. Dr. Martin Gray served as Earth's chief scientific advisor and had been one of the architects of humanity's forced evolution during the isolation period. His research teams had developed technologies that solved problems the aliens did not even know existed. Medical advances had extended human lifespans and enhanced physical capabilities. Genetic modifications had improved human intelligence and creativity. Cybernetic implants had created hybrid beings that combined biological intuition with digital processing power. "We are no longer the same species that was banished from the galaxy," Dr. Gray reported to the Global Council. "Our population has tripled during the isolation period despite limited resources. Our technology has advanced more in 50 years than in the previous 2 centuries. Most importantly, our social systems have evolved to handle challenges that would destroy other civilizations." The forced unity created by external threat had eliminated many of the conflicts that had historically weakened humanity. National governments still existed, but they were subordinate to the global defense authority that coordinated all aspects of human survival. Economic systems had been redesigned to maximize efficiency rather than profit. Educational systems produced citizens who were trained from childhood to think in terms of species survival rather than individual advancement. Meanwhile, the galactic situation continued deteriorating at an accelerating pace. The great trade networks that had connected thousands of worlds were fragmenting as transportation systems failed. Medical facilities that had served billions of patients were closing as supplies of human-developed medicines ran out. Research institutions were abandoning projects that could have advanced galactic knowledge by centuries because they lacked the human scientists who had been driving innovation. The crystalline dominion faced the complete collapse of their perfect geometric cities as automated systems designed by human programmers began malfunctioning in unpredictable ways. Crystal beings thought in mathematical patterns that were precise but inflexible. They could not adapt to situations that required creative problem-solving or intuitive leaps of logic. Ambassador X High had lost much of his lustrous crystalline glow as stress fractures began appearing throughout his body. "Our computational systems are generating error cascades that we cannot correct," he reported to an emergency council session. "The human-designed algorithms that managed our infrastructure contained self-modifying code that adapted to changing conditions. Without human programmers to guide these modifications, the systems are becoming increasingly unstable." The Vorthan hegemony was experiencing ecological collapse throughout their aquatic habitats as biological systems lost their delicate balance. These cephalopod beings understood the ocean environments they lived in, but they could not replicate the complex interventions that human marine biologists had used to maintain artificial ecosystems. Our population centers are becoming uninhabitable, Representative Gorthville announced with distressed color, patterns flashing across his skin. The biofilters that humans designed to process our waste products are failing faster than we can repair them. We are facing the possibility of toxic contamination in habitats that house over 50 billion of our people. A forest consortium was dealing with agricultural disasters that threatened famine across dozens of worlds. These plant-like beings had assumed that they understood farming better than any animal species, but they were discovering that human agricultural techniques incorporated subtle biological relationships that took decades to develop and maintain. Our crop yields have fallen below subsistence levels on 12 major agricultural worlds. Elder branch speaker Sylvaner reported with leaves rustling in patterns that indicated severe distress. The soil management techniques that humans taught U.S. required constant adjustment based on factors that we did not realize were important. Without human agricultural advisors, our farming systems are failing completely. Captain Alex Turner continued his reconnaissance missions, gathering evidence of the collapse while remaining undetected by Council forces. His reports painted a picture of civilization in freefall as the sophisticated infrastructure of Galactic society broke down without the human expertise that had kept it functioning. Confirmed breakdown of the Rigel shipping network, Alex transmitted during one of his intelligence runs. The automated cargo handling systems that humans designed and maintained have malfunctioned beyond repair. Billions of tons of essential supplies are stranded in orbit around dead stations, while populated worlds face shortages of food and medicine. The situation had become so desperate that some council members began holding secret meetings to discuss options that would have been unthinkable just years earlier. Ambassador HFY stood before the emergency session of the Galactic Council, and for the first time in his long crystalline existence, he felt something that his species rarely experienced: fear. His once brilliant prismatic body had dulled to a pale shadow of its former glory as stress fractures ran through his molecular structure like scars of failure. Around him, the great chamber that had once hummed with the confident energy of 1,000 thriving civilizations now felt like a tomb where the last representatives of dying species had gathered to witness their own extinction. Honored members of the Council, HFY began with his voice resonating through translation systems that were themselves beginning to show signs of the technological decay spreading across the galaxy. The analysis conducted by our finest scientists and mathematicians has produced results that cannot be disputed or ignored. At the current rate of systemic degradation, galactic civilization has approximately 18 months before complete infrastructure collapse. The chamber erupted in a cacophony of alien sounds as representatives from dying civilizations voiced their desperation in dozens of different ways. Bioluminescent patterns flashed in panic across cephalopod skin, while gaseous beings swirled in agitated formations that indicated extreme distress. Mechanical species clicked and whirred as their internal systems processed the terrible implications of HFY's announcement. Elder Mothka of the Ethereal Collective raised her energy field to its maximum intensity, demanding attention from the chaotic assembly. Her ancient voice carried through the chamber with the weight of 10,000 years of accumulated wisdom, and for the first time in her long existence, that wisdom felt like a burden rather than a blessing. We gathered here 50 years ago, convinced that we were saving the galaxy from a dangerous threat, she announced as her gaseous form swirled with patterns of regret that were visible even to species that could not normally interpret ethereal emotional displays. We told ourselves that humans were a plague that would consume everything in their path if left unchecked. We convinced ourselves that removing them was an act of wisdom and foresight. The elder paused as her form brightened with energy that seemed to come from some deep internal source. We were wrong. catastrophically, completely, unforgivably wrong. Humans were not a plague upon the galaxy. They were its immune system. They were the connective tissue that held our diverse civilizations together. They were the problem solvers who found solutions to challenges that we did not even recognize as problems. Representative Gorthval of the Vorthan hegemony pulsed with colors that indicated both agreement and despair. Our scientists have analyzed human methodologies for decades, trying to understand how they accomplished what they did. Their approaches appeared simple on the surface, but contained layers of complexity that we cannot replicate. They made intuitive connections between disparate fields of knowledge that our more specialized thinking patterns cannot duplicate. The confession that followed was perhaps the most difficult moment in the recorded history of galactic politics. Species after species stood before the assembly and admitted that they could not survive without the humans they had sought to destroy. The proud crystalline dominion acknowledged that their perfect cities were crumbling without human maintenance. The ancient forest consortium confessed that their agricultural worlds were facing famine without human farming techniques. The technological mechanic imperium admitted that their factories and power plants were shutting down without human engineers. The vote to reverse the quarantine must be unanimous, Elder Mothka announced as the full scope of the disaster became clear to everyone present. We cannot approach the humans with divided intentions or partial commitment. If we are to ask for their help, we must be prepared to offer them full partnership in galactic civilization, not as junior members seeking acceptance, but as the leaders we should have recognized them to be from the beginning. The vote was swift and unanimous, but the real challenge lay ahead. The Council had to find a way to approach the species they had tried to eliminate and convince them to save the very civilizations that had voted for their destruction. It was a task that required more humility than most of the assembled representatives had ever shown in their entire existence. The diplomatic mission that approached the Sol system consisted of the most senior representatives from every major civilization in the galaxy. Their ships were ancient vessels of great beauty and historical significance, chosen to demonstrate the importance and sincerity of their mission. But as they neared the boundary of human space, they encountered something that none of them had expected. Admiral Sarah Williams commanded the human response from her flagship, the UES Defiance, a vessel that incorporated technologies the aliens had never seen before. Her ship materialized out of seemingly empty space as quantum stealth systems deactivated, revealing a sleek, predatory design that spoke of 50 years of military innovation driven by survival necessity. Council ships, this is Admiral Williams of the United Earth Defense Force. Her voice carried across the communication channels with an authority that surprised the alien diplomats. You are approaching the sovereign territory of humanity. State your intentions, or prepare to be escorted away from our border. The elderly woman who appeared on their communication screens bore little resemblance to the humans the Council remembered from 50 years ago. Her gray hair and lined face spoke of decades spent preparing for this moment, while her uniform displayed insignia and decorations that indicated extensive military experience. Behind her, the bridge of her ship showed technology that seemed to blend human innovation with principles the aliens could not identify. Elder Mothka took the responsibility of speaking for the delegation as her gaseous form swirled with patterns that indicated deep respect and supplication. Admiral Williams, we come before you not as representatives of the Council that condemned your species, but as beings who have learned the terrible cost of our mistakes. The galaxy is dying without the contributions that humanity provided, and we humbly request your assistance in preventing the deaths of billions of innocent beings. Admiral Williams studied the alien representatives with eyes that had seen too much suffering and betrayal to be easily moved by words. You destroyed our colonies, erased our contributions to galactic civilization, and imprisoned us in our home system for the crime of being human. You voted unanimously to gradually reduce our population to what you considered sustainable levels. Now you come begging for help because your perfect galaxy without humans is collapsing around you. The silence that followed was broken by Dr. Martin Gray, who stepped forward from his position beside the Admiral. His appearance was even more surprising to the aliens than the Admiral's military bearing. Cybernetic implants were visible along. His temples and his eyes held an intelligence that seemed enhanced beyond normal human capabilities. "We will help," Dr. Gray announced simply, and his words seemed to surprise even some of the humans on the bridge. "Not because you deserve our assistance, and certainly not because we have forgiven what you tried to do to us. We will help because there are 18 billion sapient beings dying throughout the galaxy, while their leaders refuse to admit their mistakes." Admiral Williams nodded at her colleague's words, but her expression remained stern as she addressed the alien delegation. "The galaxy you wanted without humans is gone forever, Dr. Gray. Is correct that we will provide assistance, but the galaxy we rebuild together will be very different from what existed before. Humanity will not return as supplicants seeking acceptance. We will return as partners in a new form of galactic civilization." As the first human ships began preparations for their return to galactic space, they carried with them technologies and capabilities that the Council had never imagined. 50 years of isolation had transformed humanity from eager colonists into seasoned survivors who had learned to thrive under impossible conditions. The ships themselves were marvels of engineering that incorporated quantum manipulation stealth, systems and defensive capabilities that could challenge entire battle fleets. Dr. Gray led the advance team that would assess the scope of the galactic crisis and begin implementing solutions. His enhanced cognitive abilities allowed him to process vast amounts of information, while his cybernetic implants provided direct interface with computer systems that even human programmers of 50 years ago could not have comprehended. The first priority is stabilizing the critical infrastructure that supports the largest population centers, he explained to his team as their ship, the UES Renaissance, approached the first of many failing systems they would need to repair. "We can save billions of lives just by restoring the atmospheric processors and waste management systems that are currently failing throughout Council space." The human engineers and scientists who accompanied Dr. Gray represented the pinnacle of human development during the isolation period. Many incorporated cybernetic enhancements that allowed them to interface directly with alien technologies, while others had undergone genetic modifications that enhanced their ability to work in extreme environments or process complex information. As human ships spread throughout the galaxy, they encountered the full scope of the disaster that the Council's decision had created.